Um,
Sorry.
it's something that's near and dear to me because I happen to be in the human resources field. And a little known fact about me, when I was putting together my bio, I realized that most of my jobs I got through networking, 80% of them. I never even really realized it until I put together this introduction. Uh, Anyway, let me just go back to the opening, and I want to welcome all of you to Networking in Times of COVID-19. I think most of us are working at home, and luckily we didn't have to take the subway in this heat wave to attend the class. And I'm so pleased to be here. I consider myself a friend of Baruch. I have taught a number of courses, both for the undergraduates, the STAR program, and I'm also an advisor for the MBA consulting program that are doing case studies, which is fascinating as well. And I even took summer classes at Baruch when I was an undergraduate at Citi. So I'm connected all the way with Baruch. Networking, I feel, is underutilized. It doesn't always get the desired results, or it looks like face value, it's hard to accomplish. But I think that this is a banner year for networking, because think about it. We're not venturing out. There are less in-person meetings where, depending on where we live, we're in stage 1 or stage 2, depending on what Governor Cuomo says for New York. So this is a great time. It's something you can even do from your home. Many of us have previously, myself included, tried to find a job online by applying virtually. You have LinkedIn, and I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm sure most of you are. And, I get things in my inbox that say, oh, why don't you apply for this job? You're in the top 50% of 324 applicants based on your profile. Now, to me, that's such a turnoff. What are the chances? I mean, you have a better chance to win the lottery than getting a job that way. And a lot of times, if you apply virtually, including the quick application, what it means is it goes into the big black hole, and either you get a rejection letter or you never hear from anyone. So even when you see a job, I don't want to discourage anyone, but you really have to do networking to put yourself at the top of the pile. Now, this evening, we have 7 accomplished panelists from a variety of companies that Marion has assembled. This will give you a great perspective on networking from different people and different companies, and I'll introduce them in a moment. They will talk about their networking techniques and what's worked for them, and maybe even what didn't work, because that's where you learn. But before I introduce them, I just want to talk a little bit more about me. And I talked about getting most of my jobs through networking. I've networked my way into Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, CIT. I did consulting at BlackRock, Great Performances, which is a catering company. And I even managed to network my way into the Hartford right in the midst of the financial services crisis. So if I can do it, you can do it. When done right, networking can be a shortcut to the position you want or the company you wish to join. In fact, it's also an opportunity to learn about jobs in a company that maybe you didn't even know existed. Maybe somebody was going to be leaving and it's not advertised. It's also an opportunity to meet people in the company, and then they could be your reference. They could write something on behalf of you or refer you to someone in the company that can do the same thing. So there's lots of benefits for the networking practice. Most important, we have some really accomplished panelists that will talk about their experiences. The first one is Paden Gayle. He's a technology analyst at Accenture. Then we have Daniel O, who's a financial services professional at New York Life. Then we have Chintan Parekh, who's the lead business information security officer at Fidelity Investments. Ann Hernandez, who's in human resources and is a former Deloitte professional. And Joanne's been there for 13 years. And she's also a friend of Baruch and has done a number of things for this, I think it's the STAR program, Joanne?
Sorry, I was on the mute. Yes, definitely.
Okay, that's great. And we also have Gehan Dabare, who's an enterprise information security leadership member. And also he just got a new job at Citi. So you're hearing it first. Then Toby Kovacs, who's a sales executive at Google. And last but not least, Mahir Khan, who's a human resources consultant at Bank of America. So there's going to be a lot of rich advice that you're going to be getting during this session. What I want to ask the panelists first is just to provide a few more sentences about your professional experience and anything else you wish to share, maybe very briefly, about 2 or 3 sentences. Let's start with Paden. Paden, you can unmute.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Paden. I work as a technology analyst at Accenture. At Baruch, I studied CIS with a focus in data analytics and a minor in math. I guess you could say my way or how I got into consulting was kind of weird, but for the most part, I wasn't sure what I wanted to go into. So that's when I said, you know what, consulting is the way to go, since I know like a lot of people, especially at Baruch, if you're not quite sure what exactly you want to do, consulting is almost the default, since you get to try a lot of different fields, try some things out and see what you like. And that's initially why I wanted to go into consulting. But then after starting it, I realized that my passion lies more in software engineering. So currently I'm trying to position myself both in Accenture and honestly outside of it into that role, since I feel like after working in a job, even though it's for a short time, the thing that you want to put first is that you want to be in a role and in a company that you both respect. Otherwise, it'll be hard to do it every day.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Next is Daniel O, New York Life.
Hi, Patti. Thank you for the intro. So I worked as a financial services professional for about 2.5 years. I've been with New York Life now 7 years. So I've then since moved on into management. So I'm a partner, one of 4 partners in the New York Life Westchester office. So part of my responsibility is to grow the agency, but also to develop professionals. And I'm happy to say, you know, thankfully we're all happy and healthy at this point. Being in Westchester, that being said, I look forward to sharing some insights and also learning from this panel, as well as the other folks that are here tonight. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Chintan?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chintan Parekh. In my current role, I am working in the capacity of Business Information Security Officer for Fidelity Investments. With Fidelity, I have been close to 3 years with them now. Before joining Fidelity, I share a company with Patti. I was working with JP Chase. All throughout my last 15 years, I have been working in the field of cybersecurity, technology risk management, and enterprise compliance. So that's kind of my professional journey. From education perspective, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have been born and raised in Mumbai in India. And I also did my master's in operations management back in Mumbai. Currently, I'm based out of Dallas. From a family perspective, 2 kids, 5 and 11, both are boys. So thank you for inviting me to this session. This topic is very relatable to my professional journey, and I'm very keen to share my experience and also learn from the panelists who are on the panel to learn from their experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Chintan. Joanne, you're up next.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ann Hernandez. I got my undergraduate degree, my BS in Communication Arts from St. John's, and my MBA from Fordham, MBA in Accounting from Fordham. My work experience has included a couple of years experience in the communications field, like in J. Walter Thompson and New Line Cinema. Then I kind of transitioned more into the...
Oh,
yeah?
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me? It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Financial services industry. I worked at Prudential, UBS, Citigroup, transitioned again slightly into consulting, worked at Deloitte for about 13 years managing forensic accounting investigations and anti-money laundering investigations. And yet again, I'm doing another career transition into HR, human resources, where I want to specialize into recruiting and talent acquisition and kind of sharing my experience with individuals who are the first ones to graduate in their family, as well as ones entering the workforce, kind of sharing my past experience, my expertise, so that they can be successful as they start their new careers.
Great. That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gehan is next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making time to attend. Thanks for inviting me, Marion and Baruch. My story is, I think, the most interesting thing is I just started a new job on Monday, so my bio is kind of a little upside down. I'm no longer at MUFG. I've been at MUFG about 4 years. I was a managing director there. I just joined Citibank as a managing director in the cybersecurity practice. Marion and I were like doing a last-ditch effort because I hadn't got clearance from Citibank because I just joined and I couldn't get clearance before I joined. But we managed to get all the clearances yesterday, right? So yeah, so here I am. I'm a first generation immigrant, worked on Wall Street for 25 years. So you're talking about networking, talking about getting to know people. Every single job I've gotten, except this one, was through an introduction. Even this one was an introduction, but kind of different. We can delve into that if people are interested. But and so the reason I mentioned those two things is, as a first generation immigrant, it's not like I had a lot of connectivity to begin with. So everybody I have connected with over the years has been something that I have had to do myself. So I wasn't a Rockefeller, still not. So if I can do it, everybody can. But please don't just blindly send me LinkedIn requests, because I am very careful about who I add. So if you're sending me a LinkedIn, tell me what I can do for you and who you are a little bit, so that I can figure out whether you are somebody who wants to connect and do something fun, or whether you are just somebody trying to fish me and attack my credentials and break into my bank. Right? So.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Gehan. Toby, you're up next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Patti, and really thrilled to be part of the panel today. I guess in short, 30 years in technology, client-facing roles, sales, new business development, account management for technology companies, large ones like AT&T, Thomson Financial, IHS Markit, and then a number of high-growth venture-backed companies as well, always in the New York region. I mean, I have to agree with you, Patti, that I think, listen, there's a lot of challenges right now because of the situation with COVID, and yet I agree that it's a banner year. It can be a banner year for those who take the initiative with networking. And as I look back on my career, I've been in public relations and management consulting, and I think especially when you're looking to make a change where you're not, as I like to put it, you're not a round peg going into a round hole. When you're making some of these non-traditional changes, networking is particularly essential. And now that we're all stuck at home, I think there's, people are more receptive than ever, as Gehan was just alluding to people who connect online and make those sort of connections and look to strike up conversations. And we all have we have a little more time, and we're open to those sorts of connections. So I think it is the perfect time to network.
Those are good points. Thank you. Mahir?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mihir. I'm one of the Baruch alums, like many of you here. I graduated in 2017 with a human resource management degree and minored in psychology. And right after school, I went to work for Bank of America and have been working there for the past 3 years in different roles. Initially, I was in a financial role as a relationship manager in the consumer sector, and later on transitioned to HR, where I've been working for the past 2 years. I work for the global banking team as an HR generalist / consultant, and our team kind of just give advice to the managers on how to manage their human capital, especially with COVID and all the unrest going on. I think that employees in a company are very sometimes stressed and nervous, And our job as HR is to calm them and give them support and tell them everything's going to be okay. So we kind of work as a psychologist as well sometimes. So very excited to be here, and I see that's over 100 participants, so happy to talk to you and looking forward to the event.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mahir. Right now, we have 126 participants online and counting. So we're really happy about that. Now, the very first question, I'm going to ask each of you to give your answer, and after that, you'll have individual questions. The first question is, how, and some of you have already mentioned this, how has networking benefited you? Let's start with Paden.
So for me, honestly, every opportunity that I've had has been through networking, either, so at SAC where I worked, the tutoring center at Baruch, it was a running joke that on every Friday I would harass people on LinkedIn. So I made it a goal. So every Friday I would message at least 5 people, and they were at a company that I wanted to work at or were in a role that I was interested in. And just doing that, I've gotten a lot of either referrals or just honestly a friend that I could go to for advice for either the company that I want or the role that I want. And I feel like just doing that through LinkedIn has been the most beneficial, but then there's also conferences and meetups. And honestly, on the train, if you see someone and you like, so just a quick little story on the train, someone was coming home and I realized that they had a badge for Deloitte. So I just started talking to them because I was interested in consulting, and I'm honestly still friends with that person today. So you really never know where you'll meet someone to where you could find like an honest connection about and where it might lead to in the future toward in regards to a career.
Great answer. Thank you, Paden. Daniel, you're up next.
Sure. For me, I think networking, for one, the reason I'm on this panel is because I reached out. And one way that I wanted to give back to Baruch was to see how I can volunteer. And Marion was the first one to invite me. So for the past 3 years or so, I think we've been part of some different part of Baruch. So I'm a Baruch alumni as well. So I wanted to go back to, where I came from to a certain degree and be able to give back. And this is kind of why I've been invited to this panel as well. So I think networking it can seem challenging, especially in these times. We all agree, but we're not meeting, people face to face. We're not shaking hands. We're not, sharing drinks or doing stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think networking really comes down to kind of building relationships and kind of nurturing that as well. So I think we can find different mediums to do that, even in these trying times, to be able to reach out to folks. And through networking, I've been able to really not only grow my practice when I was working as an advisor, but more than that, through networking, I was able to hire so many diverse as well as talented individuals, right, to come onto my team as well. So I think it works, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm here as well to share some of my insights as well. So thank you.
Okay, that's some great points, Daniel. Chintan?
Sure. So I have, in my last 15 years, I have worked in 2 major corporations, JP Morgan and Fidelity. I want to ensure that we put together the point in terms of that networking is not just for getting a job out there, right? So I have used the networking opportunities to meet with many people who now have converted into my mentors or good friends, and are kind of going a lot of professional relationship, which has helped me to do that, right? So, but in my 12 years with JP Morgan, I used to meet at least 1 person a month. That was my kind of a goal, and that has helped me a lot in my journey with JP Morgan, because you can meet the person, you can learn about the company culture, you can learn about what they do, and in all, you can also give and help them in certain aspects of their professional career, right? So I think networking to me is not just like when you go outside the firm and you start meeting new people outside the firm. For me, since I have worked only in 2 corporations, networking has played very important role inside the company, and not just for seeking professional help, but also getting into more about getting mature as a professional, learning from them, and taking to the next level as a not from just networking, but to the mentoring, right? So that's the point I want to just put this across. Like, I have personally benefited a lot in last 15 years through networking.
Oh, that's great. Those are great points. Thank you. Joanne?
Hi. So networking, I know it has a negative connotation because it has the word work in it itself. But I would say networking is more about sharing information, having a discussion with someone that you have a similar background with, and perhaps it's also a two-way discussion where the person's going to get to know you and you're going to get to know the person as well. Similar to what was previously said, when you want to connect with someone on LinkedIn, it's not just a matter of sending that automatic invitation, but making it a little bit more personalized and saying, hey, I heard you as a speaker and Baruch panelist. I'd like to add you to my contacts. I want to expand my network, and just kind of tap into the resource of that individual. It is a sharing of information. The way you can kind of keep in touch with that person is perhaps if you come across an article or something that you believe would be beneficial for that person, kind of sending it to them that way, whether it's through their email or whether it's through their LinkedIn. But it is just an opportunity to expand your network, meet other individuals, other professionals that you can kind of tap into as a resource, as a mentor, or perhaps that you can kind of learn from them, learn about their firm, learn about their experience, because we're all here to help each other out. We've all been there when we were college students or college graduates, not knowing what field or firms to apply to, and it's definitely a resource that we can easily tap into.
That's a good point, Joanne. I find networking, even using LinkedIn, is fun. You know, you're just sitting there and you're learning about people and you're learning from them and they're learning from you, and then they refer you to someone. It's just a great way to use it. Thank you. Gehan?
Sure, thank you. So it's kind of interesting how how I'm on this panel. I think that's just describing how I'm on this panel is a great example of how networking can be, right? And networking shouldn't be about connecting with people when you need something. I think the real true networkers are always looking to give back and establish relationships in that sense versus trying to get something out. And that's when you pick up a phone and call somebody. So my path to this panel was I leveraged the relationship at my previous company because I'd done some work with the folks in HR. They introduced me to the people at Corporate Giving, who introduced me to Donna Haggerty, who introduced me to Marion. And then I introduced Chintan to Marion, because Chintan and I had worked together at JP Morgan and we knew each other. So I think the spirit with which you should engage is, how can I add value? How can I provide something of increase in value to the whole? And if you approach it like that, how can you be useful? How can you be kind to people? Then I think your network will flourish, and you will find that more people want to connect with you and want to be part of your network, right? So try to approach it with that kind of mentality. And I think I agree with like every other thought expressed here. Networking, not just to find a job, definitely network when you're in a job, because you know those people will move, and it's good to know people in all these different companies. So so that's my journey. My journey here has been through networking.
Yeah, that's interesting that you called it a journey, and it really is, and a very interesting journey, and it pays back. You give and it pays back. Okay, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I would second Patti, what you had said before. You stole a little bit of my thunder about it being such a pleasure. I listen, if you have an interest in people, you like to learn both about individuals, about different businesses, it can be fun. And it's often thought of as a tool for job hunting. I really see it as, and a number of the other panelists have, said so much. It's an essential business tool, period. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I just also, like Gehan, just started a new job. I just started a job in sales at Google. And long story short, it was a result of networking. But I have not met my boss in person. I haven't met nearly the entire job search or interview process was over video calls. And now what I'm finding as a new employee at Google is that I have to build a new network. I have to, using video chat, phone calls, et cetera, have to build a network. So one thing that I've done every Friday, I reach out to 3 or 4 people who I've met over the course of the previous week. And I say, hey, 4:30, 5 o'clock, we're going to raise a glass to a good week gone by.
Oh.
And we have a video call where we have drinks for an hour. It's never more than an hour, because frankly, I find that anything over an hour looking at a screen drives me nuts. But through that, we're able to break through the ice, learn a little bit more about each other, and almost guaranteed the next week, one of those folks that we had drinks together with is somebody that I reach out to exchange an idea on a business related matter. But so it takes initiative, as other panels have said, and and it can be a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. I like the idea of Fridays too, because, the TGIF type of thing, and, people aren't going into pubs right now, and, you're doing the networking anyway. So that's a great idea. Mahir?
So I think for me, networking is something that helped me in two ways. First of all, I made some lifelong friends through networking. And these are professionals that I did not know before. I just went there, started networking with them, and now 2 years down the line, I talk to them very frequently, and they're really great friends. And I think that networking shouldn't just be transactional. It's not about finding the job or getting into a company, but I think that through networking, you can find great mentors and great friends, and that's what was the case for me. My current mentor, I met her through a networking event, and she's even now is a good friend and a good mentor. And secondly, I would throw back what Paden said. My current job, I did find through networking. My initial job with Bank of America was finance and sales. And even though that was my first job with the bank, I realized within a few months that that was not the greatest fit for me. So I started networking. I wanted to go back to HR, and it took me a while, but eventually I networked with enough people so that my name came up on the top of the list when they were hiring for a junior HR analyst position. And I interviewed for it, and I got the interview so fast because people knew me, and I was networking actively out there with different HR employees. So that kind of pushed me a little higher up in the ladder during the interview process. And lo and behold, I got the job. And even though it was very difficult to move over from finance to HR so early in my career, I think that the networking part really helped. So I think it was very beneficial for me.
Excellent example. Thank you. And in fact, your question comes up next, which you've partially answered, but that's fine, and maybe you can add to it. Where are places you've networked?
Where are places I network? Well, Baruch is my first networking location. Like a lot of the professors I see in this call, Ingrid, Professor Seaman, they were my first networks. Marion was one of my first networking person. He was my mentor and interviewer for STAR, but that was 6-7 years ago. And every other month I still talk to Marion, and every time I go to Baruch, I see Ingrid, I say hello. And those are my first mentoring and networking people that I still remember. And I think that I networked everywhere I went, whether it was an internship, whether it was a larger corporation, employee network, clubs in Baruch, everywhere. Networking doesn't have to be transactional. Not everyone I met or introduced myself to, I had the goal of landing a job or getting an in with the company. It was just to introduce myself, see what experience they have, just grab coffee and learn more about their career. It doesn't have to be within HR. Any other role is fine as well. So for me, I was really looking to expand my circle, meet new people, and that was my goal. So I pretty much networked everywhere, every event I went to.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Good examples. Thank you. Okay, Daniel, how do you maintain a relationship with a professional contact that you networked with throughout the years? This is an important question because sometimes I look at my contacts and I have a lot of them. And I think, gee, I haven't even contacted that person in a while. So how have you done that, Daniel?
Hopefully I can give you a good answer for that then, right? No pressure there. But I think staying connected is easier, right, than ever today. So in terms of kind of being able to share certain, social media in terms of LinkedIn or other platforms out there, I think it's easy to stay connected. And I do make it a point where if my contact that I've connected with on LinkedIn, if they share something or if they post something, I do comment or like, or I'm not commenting on everything, right? But that being said, I am letting them know that I'm engaged in kind of what they're doing, and I'm actually actively looking at what they're sharing as well. So there is interest there. So I do that. I think because of the times that we live in, I made a conscious decision, right, in the past 3 months to make an outreach. It could be a text, an email, even a simple, right, phone call that I call to check in on them. I think that has helped to maintain those relationships. As I mentioned, once you establish that and you have a good kind of working, where you kind of know what that person's about and you're also kind of feeling good about that relationship, I think it helps, right, to continue to nurture that. And whatever that may be, it was mentioned earlier, if it's coffee, if it's drinks, if it's a meal later on, I think that all makes sense as well. So one of the big things, and I'll end with this, I built my career in financial services about 7 years ago. I came from a background, I studied finance at Baruch, but I did corporate HR for about 10 years. So for me, knowing that to maintain those relationships was impactful, but also continue that really helped me as I built my career in financial services. So working with an estate planning lawyer, I would have lunch or breakfast with them once a month. So I would build that core group of people that I can work with to help each other. And ultimately that led to a more meaningful relationships where they're part of my kind of board of directors, if you want to call it that. So just that simple touch, I think, helps a lot.
Wow. You know, Daniel, I was just about to say, it sounds like you're building a board of directors, and you beat me to it. Because a lot of times we HR people say that you got to get your board that you can go to, maybe from different disciplines. So you put it very well. Thank you, Daniel. Chintan, when is it appropriate to give the professional networking, to give the professional you're working with your resume?
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to start with the context that networking is about getting to know the people. When you connect with a contact, the idea is that you will be able to use your network to find a job someday or learn from them at some point of time. But in order for someone to recommend you for a position, they need to know you, they need to like you, they need to trust you first. After all, they are kind of putting their own reputation on the line by suggesting you for a job with their organization or to their referrals. In my view, the goal is to build a strong relationship and establish rapport so that if a potential opportunity becomes available in future, they will want to refer you. Coming back and circling back to the question, I think in my view, once you are able to build a strong rapport and relationship with the person you are networking, feel free to share your resume, asking for their feedback and requesting any changes to the resume. And that way, the idea is to seek their expertise to improve your resume overall. And during the review of the resume, the person might be able to refer you to the position they are aware of. I think, again, I will go back to the key over here is that how we can stay professional and leverage the networking relationship to further the professional aspirations. And the foundation should be strong where you are working through building the relationship and rapport.
Right. That's a good point, Chintan. Thank you. Joanne, when you're networking with people you don't know, do you feel like you're taking advantage without them benefiting? What are your thoughts about this?
I don't believe so, because it is a two-way communication. It's a two-way street. So you're sharing information with someone, and perhaps on their end, maybe they'd like to know what it's like to have someone who just recently graduated college. What is a person who's a recent college graduate? What's on their mind? Mm-hmm. Maybe they want to know more about someone who's multilingual, speaks different languages or different cultures. I think there's a lot that current students, graduates, and even alumni can bring to the table and share information with their new contacts. So networking is more about helping a person, whatever information they might need. Maybe they need something that needs to be put together, or they just want to tap into your mind to just get your thoughts. So I think networking it's important to be aware that it is a two-way conversation. It's not only that you're going to be asking for something, but you do have a lot to bring to the table that you may self not even know, but there is a lot that the professional would really like to gather information about. One thing I'd like to mention is that I do a lot of volunteering, especially with the students in Baruch Star Center, is that I think a lot of students and even graduates, even alumni, should realize that there's a lot of professional organizations out there, and they can join as a student and definitely expand their network by meeting other professionals. And you know, I'm talking about Alpha, NABA, Ascent, but there's so many other professional organizations that students can join very cheaply. versus a professional, and that's definitely expanding your entire network.
No, that's true. That's an excellent point about networking. And it's true that a lot of times there's special student rates, like you mentioned. So thank you, Joanne. Okay, Gehan, people are always talking about this hidden job market, and networking is a way to break into that. Could you talk about that?
Sure. So from the time somebody finds a new job, tells their boss that they're leaving, and when the manager gets to actually open the requisition to backfill that slot and get it up on LinkedIn or wherever, there is a period of time where he's running around getting approvals, he has to fill in the right forms and provide a job description and all this stuff, right? And he's very much aware that once he gets that thing filled out, he's still got to wait considerable amount of time to find the right candidate. So generally, people around that vacancy are aware that, hey, there's a job here that needs to be filled, and everybody is very interested in getting somebody they like, or would not have a problem working with into that role. Like, I mean, who wants to work with somebody horrible, right? So without leaving it to chance, they all kind of start, sending in resumes of friends and recommending people and stuff like that, because I'd rather work with somebody I like than leave it to somebody else to choose who I work with, right? So there is generally a lag period, depending on companies and how efficient they are in their approval processes, of at least a month, if not 3 months on the outside, where there is a job, everybody knows there's a job, to when the rec is posted. So by the time the rec is posted, people who are kind of connected, know the people in that company, are already kind of coming in for a casual conversation. You might not be allowed to interview formally because the job is not posted, but there's nothing to prevent you from grabbing a coffee or getting a beer or whatever it is, right? So at any given point in time, there is a portfolio or inventory of jobs that are not officially posted that are open. So by the time they get posted, if you already met with the people and they clicked with you, they connected, they felt, you had the right credentials, the right background, had the right communication skills, and you were part of that tribe, then you are definitely, if you haven't already gotten the job, you're definitely way ahead of anybody that finds the job and sends in a resume.
Right. In other words, you're in the running and you already have a leg up on everybody else. That's well put. Thank you very much. Toby, how do you build rapport with professionals in a short period of time? Do you have a go-to topic or a way of starting a conversation?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of the principles that apply for building rapport and quickly online also applied in the old world where we actually met face-to-face in person. Let me just, start there, which is that, I think that, frankly, for a lot of us, it's challenging. Even, those of us who think that we're fairly good at networking find it difficult, for example, at a career event or an association meeting or a business meeting of some sort, convention, to go up to somebody and say, let's talk, right? What's the way to break into that? Frankly, I've found the easiest thing is just to walk up and say, may I introduce myself? I'm Toby. What's your name? And things naturally flow from there. People are just as eager to build rapport with you and to make a connection, I think, as you are to make that connection with them. And I think if you keep in mind that, and then also that you're in essence doing them a favor, right? By taking that initiative, being friendly, showing that you're open, I think you probably get a very good response. Online, I do think, you know, we're all stuck right now. It's a little bit more of a challenge, but many of the same principles apply. There, you can't have a, you know, a serendipitous or casual introduction, right? Everything is planned, right? So there, the challenge is, so you have a planned discussion. You know, perhaps you've arranged through a referral to have an informational interview, which I think is a key concept, right? I mean, that's really what we're all talking about, is how to use an interview as an informational interview. You're not going for a specific job. You're looking to gain information and to share information, right? And that, you know, that's the kind of exchange that we've all talked about. So again, you know, I think if you, you know, if you show from the very start, if you lay groundwork, this is my purpose in speaking to you. I'm very grateful for your time, and you show that you're prepared with good questions and a genuine interest.
Right.
I think the rapport comes very naturally.
Oh, thank you. And you did lay the groundwork for a non-threatening conversation. So it's not like, oh, Toby's gonna, you know, now ask for a job, or, you know, tell me to connect him with somebody. It's just more gentle, and it's more open-ended, and it's more relaxed, I think, when you do it that way, the way you described it.
Yeah, and Patty, if I may, you know, it's also a key concept in sales in general, right? There's a difference between a close-ended question and an open-ended question, right? The close-ended question being a yes or no. Do you have a job for me? No, or yes. But it can be a very quick conversation versus an open-ended question, which is, I'm tremendously interested in your work in banking. I think I have a lot of the skill sets that would lead to a successful career in banking. I'd be curious to hear about your experience.
Right.
Can you tell me about that? That's an open-ended question. There's no yes or no, and guaranteed somebody's going to say, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. In fact, I've done a lot of interviewing in my different jobs, and it's the more you get the other person, if you're on an interview, to talk about themselves or their company, the more they have a good time doing it. People love to talk about themselves. So here you get them to open up, and then they think, gee, I really enjoyed talking to Toby. I wasn't sure what he wanted from me, but, you know, so that's an excellent point. Thank you very much.
If you do that, just don't forget to get across your main point, which is to leave a key message about yourself.
Yourself.
I've fallen into the trap of getting, people are so eager to talk about themselves. At the end of the day, they may not even remember anything about you. Make sure that you get across the point. What is that point that you want to get across? I am X looking for Y. Thank you so much for helping me. Oh, and by the way, and this is an important tactic that I think a lot of us forget, ask, at the end of every conversation, ask for one or two people that they would recommend you to speak with next, and build your network that way.
And then you could say that that person referred you or introduced.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, the last question is for Paden. Paden, is it appropriate to network internally? And how would you network at work if you do that? Is it different for a large corporation versus a small office?
So I feel that's mostly about reading the room. So when networking internally, it's good to, you know, get feedback from everybody, see what people are doing, like just keeping in touch. But at the same time, if you're networking, most of the time it's because you are, or for me personally looking to venture elsewhere. So for me, networking internally is not as beneficial as networking somewhere outside or in small offices. But I don't think that means you should completely disregard it, because again, people do switch jobs, especially these days. People are switching jobs every 2 to 3 years and even sooner. So I feel like right now it's a good time to don't just disregard the fact that I'm working here, so I don't need to network. Still see like who's doing what they're doing, are you interested in it? Because again, you never know where these people might end up 5 or 10 years from now.
That's right. Okay, well put. Thank you. I know that we have a lot of questions in the chat room, so I'm just going to fast forward on this. I want to thank you, the participants. Don't go away though, because you might end up answering some of the questions yourself. We heard some great networking advice, and it's all pragmatic things that the panelists have used and been successful. And feel free to try out any of these. I think I even learned something, and I've been in HR my whole career, so it's wonderful. Just keep in mind, most jobs are filled through networking, and keep that to the audience too, that's one of the ways to go. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Marion, who's going to lead a discussion on some of the great questions that you as the audience have asked.
Okay.
Marion?
Thank you, everyone. I don't know, did we miss Mahir? I don't know if we had question. Did we have a question from Mahir?
Yep, the first one.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, we switched it around. Sorry, my fault.
Yeah, it's where there are places you've networked. Yeah.
I don't know where I was.
That's okay.
But you know, one of the questions I think someone was asked is like, when you know someone already, this is a person you know, how do you continue the conversation, and eventually how do you tactfully ask that you're looking for a job? Because when you're sort of, people have said you're networking, you don't necessarily want to aggressively ask for a job, but there's a point, and where is that point, I guess, is the question. That what would be a cue to say, hey, I want to let this person know I'm looking for a job.
Right.
So if it wasn't directed to anyone, so if anyone wants to sort of answer that question.
I guess what would help when you're reaching out to someone is if you've done your research and you know specifically what job you're interested in, or what job you're applying to. For my experience, most people want to help you, but they don't know how to help you. Mm-hmm. So let's just say let's say Citigroup. You look at Citigroup and you know a couple of people who are working at Citigroup. If you go online to Citigroup and you see a couple of jobs that are listed, perhaps when you're reaching out to that contact that you know works at Citigroup, you'd say, hey, how are you? I'm interested in this position. And if that position's already filled, maybe another position that is in line with that. So kind of helping the person help you, because you kind of want to, when you reach out to an individual through networking, you kind of want to give them some guidance as to what kind of field or job or location or specialty that you're interested in. So give them as much information as you can about yourself so that they in turn can help you, versus kind of just saying, hey, I want a job, or hey, I need a job. It's not going to help you get anywhere. So that would be my suggestion.
Right. And especially if you're talking within a Citigroup, a very large company. There are over 100,000 people who work for Citigroup, so or 200,000 at this point. So
yeah, 220.
So okay, Marion.
Yes. The other thing, sure. Gehan, you mentioned earlier, when you send me a LinkedIn invite, be mindful about what you say. Someone was asking, what are very quick words that you want to hear or see on an email? Sometimes with LinkedIn, if you don't know each other, it's very limited in what you can say. What are some things we suggest? Definitely don't use the default. I know Gehan mentioned that, but what are some things they can say in a short period of, like, minimum characters, basically?
So context. Hey, know you through somebody, or met you at this event, or for me personally, if you tell me how I can be helpful, that's good, right? Like, what I don't like to do personally is to add people to my network that I don't know, and then and I actively engage with the people in my LinkedIn. So when I suddenly look at the name in like 6 months' time, I have no idea how I know this person. At least if they sent me a message saying, hey, this is why I'm connecting with you, or I would like to connect with you this way, I can always go back to the connection, click on message, and that message will be there. And then I'll remember, oh, this is why, right? So in general, I don't link with people I don't know, right? Whether I met them physically or got introduced to them through someone. But if somebody pings me and say, can you please help me with this? Then I'm more likely to respond and say, okay, hey, let me help you with this, like so. Or, yeah, I'll accept your invite, right? So a little bit of context really helps.
Good point.
So other question is, obviously there's LinkedIn. We always talk, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, and everyone, is pretty much using LinkedIn. I know, Paden, you mentioned that you met someone at the subway. Is there what are other traditional places that you can do networking in?
I feel like truthfully anywhere you can network, but I feel like the thing that people mess up on initially when they do go to either networking events or generally trying to, I don't want to say get something from someone, but have a goal in mind, is that they don't treat the other person like a human being. They see them as like this, almost like a goalpost, as in, okay, I need to do X to get Y from someone. So just like at networking events, if you're going up to someone, just remember that, at the end of the day, this, like, they're working now, they do something after work. So almost key into that, because then they might have a deeper connection with you than, oh yeah, I saw this person at work, but I don't remember what they talked about.
Anyone else?
What not to do is to kind of ping somebody you don't know and go, I need a job or I need an internship. And you're like, you are who? Right? Mm-hmm. So, because, think about it, right? Like, I cannot recommend somebody I do not know for a job or an internship, right? Because my recommendation is me putting my reputation, myself on the line for somebody. So I gotta know you before I recommend you for something. So if you reach out and say something like, hey, I would like some advice in how to do blah, 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 or can you help me with XYZ, or I'm trying to do this, can you share your experience with me? That's more likely to get you a response from somebody, because most people are really happy to help and want to help. But at the same time, we are all trained, especially if you're in technology or cybersecurity, you're trained not to kind of respond to just, this blank, be my friend stuff, right? So a couple of people mentioned they got LinkedIn invites from a person, and I think the same person sent me a LinkedIn. I was like, I don't know you. So, and then Marion kind of shared that he had not shared the name. So how did this person find out who was on the panel, right? So that's interesting, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Marion, I'll just add that I think what we're getting at is to try not to make the relationship feel transactional, because really nobody feels very good about that, right? It leaves a bad taste in anybody's mouth. And, I think this is what, Paden was best getting at, to succinctly describe, this is my purpose in trying to connect with you. I think is kind of foundational to having a business relationship, but at the same time, A, it makes it fun, and B, it's essential also to make some sort of personal connection. So anytime I'm speaking to somebody that I don't know, I also try to look for what's that personal connection. I think actually one panelist mentioned this earlier is, for example, they went to Baruch. Well, where did they grow up? Wouldn't that be interesting to know? They grew up in Queens. Oh, what was it like growing up in Queens? So on and so forth. So to find that personal connection, because I guarantee you, months, years from now, when somebody thinks back on that conversation, they may not remember that, oh, you were the person who was looking to discuss a career in software development, but you were the person who described growing up in Queens, spending your weekends playing volleyball in the parks. That they will peg you with, and that is establishing a relationship for a long time. Now you've established your business credentials and that and who you are as a human, and that's so important.
Take a genuine interest in people, and get into the habit of collecting people, right? Collecting and investing in relationships for the long term, right? So at Goldman, we used to have a phrase: "Be long-term greedy. Don't be about the sale in front of you, be about the sale you're going to make in 6 months or 3 years." So invest in the relationship, be really genuinely interested about the people. And then it becomes second nature. You're asking questions because you want to know, you're curious, like in a good way, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I do want to circle back to the question, Marion, you asked, right? So like the question I think was that, can everything has to be done by LinkedIn, or are there any other avenues as well, right? So I will give you example of cybersecurity. I'm associated with a couple of professional organizations like ISACA or ISC Square, which provides a lot of professional education in the field of cybersecurity. And that is one of the avenue which I use to network in the same field of the people I have dealing with, right? So not necessarily everything in my view has to be done through LinkedIn. Wherever professional you are, whichever profession you are associated with, I'm sure there must be organizations which have like-minded people or similar interest people, and we can use those avenues for networking as well.
Yeah, and to your point, Chintan, this is an opportune time to also not just use LinkedIn. There are so many organizations that have free webinars, or I'm on the board of Financial Women's Association, and for non-members, they're charging $10 to happen into some great webinars. You can get concerts online. You can tap into consultants. I just listened to a McKinsey webinar yesterday, and I'm not part of them, and I was invited to the next one. I mean, there's so many things to take advantage of during this whole COVID crisis.
Absolutely. The next question is from Mahir. You mentioned that, through your networking, you were able to get a mentor. How do you transition, someone that you're having a conversation that you're networking with, to identifying them to be a mentor? How does that sort of transition?
Well, Marion, first of all, you have to know the person you're talking to. Are they in a field that you're interested in going? For me, I was an HR major looking to be into an HR field. So I would network with anybody, but when I was looking for a mentor, I was specifically looking for someone who's been in HR, who is in HR, and are willing to be a mentor. So for my mentor, she was a Baruch grad and graduated 2 years before I joined Baruch, so I never had a chance to meet her as I was a student, but she came back for a professional networking event, and when I was speaking with her, she told me how she changed her career from finance to HR, and that kind of clicked with me, that she's working in HR in a very big company, Bank of America, and that was what I was looking for in a mentor. And we kind of had similar interests. We're both part of the same honor society in school, so that kind of had a common click for both of us. And initially, I wasn't just looking for a mentor right away. I wanted to just get to know her, be her friend, eventually see if she's open to mentoring me. And after I met her, a year later, I asked her if she wanted to be my mentor. I wanted to do HR, and she agreed. So eventually, I think that if I asked her to be my mentor right away, or even after a month, it would have probably been a no. But the fact that I took a year to build my relationship with her, so it was a long game in a way, but that's how she became my mentor. And she even referred me for my current job. And even now, I've been in my job for 2 years. Whenever I have questions I don't know the answer to, I go to her, and she always is the right answer. So I would say that's how I did it.
Great, thank you. And probably this question is good for Toby. When you're setting up informational interviews, what's an appropriate way to follow up with people afterwards? So, you meet up for either coffee, wherever. What would be the protocol, I guess, for follow-ups?
Well, I mean, I think there's, minimal requirements and expectations, and then taking it the extra step. I mean, one way to think about it is that you put a lot of time and investment in that informational interview. I mean, just think of, you made the connection. It probably took several steps to get there. You set aside time for the interview itself. You probably prepared a bit for it. You've put a lot of time into it. So to really maximize the value of that time spent together, you should absolutely send a follow-up thank you note, and you'd be surprised how few people do that. I mean, I used to be of the belief that, and I'm sure a lot of us kind of, who will date ourselves here are a little bit pre-internet. We used to send a handwritten note. I no longer think that's necessary. It is a requirement to send a very well-written, professional, thoughtful email, and in a timely manner, right? So not, several days later, but, almost immediately, maybe the same day, if not the following morning, really shows that you're timely, you're on the ball, you're responsive. And then, one thing that I think a lot of people forget to do, myself included, is to follow up with people and let them know how you're doing, right? Think of it from their perspective. They've invested time with you. They've spent, some quality time, maybe even just half an hour. They'll be curious. What happened to Toby, I had this great, conversation with him. I shared with him, my network. I referred him to so-and-so. What happened there? So it's very important to go back, really just to, to show that you're grateful for the referral, for the time, for the tips, for the recommendations, advice, etc. But then also, it's just it's such a practical matter. Go back a month or two later, and maybe a month later, and then 2 months later, and then 3 months later, if you're in the middle of a job search, and say, this is where your recommendations led me. These were the results. Again, I want to thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, this is what I've subsequently learned. I'd love to follow up with you on that and ask you for your thoughts on that. And then, in a way that, that person then, Mahir was describing how, to turn somebody into a mentor, they become your advisor if you take the time to do that.
Thank you. This question is probably more appropriate for Joanne. Can you tell us a little bit about when you're switching from Deloitte doing accounting, forensic accounting, and now you're interested in HR? Did you use networking to sort of help with that decision?
Yes.
If so, how?
When I left Deloitte, I was thinking about, okay, what exactly did I really enjoy doing? And I would spend about 20% of my time at Deloitte interviewing students, onboarding them, mentoring them, coaching them, also talking to individuals when they first started, after they've gone through the onboard process, becoming a buddy. So I felt like I have a really good handle on speaking with individuals, sharing my guidance, my experience. So what I did is that I started looking at professional organizations like SHRM, networking, going to their events. Of course, now everything is virtual. So as Patti suggested, attending webinars, reaching out to individuals that perhaps other people put me in touch with or suggested I reach out to. So even though we're not necessarily in a place and time right now in New York City anyway, where we can go into a room and network, we can still network unofficially by sending people an email, maybe just meeting for coffee chat, like a video chat, or even telephone, because sometimes maybe an individual is busy and they just want to do like a telephone chat. But definitely taking the opportunity to look into different pools of people that you're already connected with, or different organizations that you could tap into where you're going to meeting new people, expanding your network, and kind of helping you with a career transition, kind of giving you guidance and tips that you may not necessarily pick up online or through a book or an article, but it's going to give you some real life facts and something really hardy that you can tap into.
Okay, thank you. Maybe this would be for Daniel or anyone else. It's a two-part question. What are good ways to sort of reconnect with people? I know sometimes when you network with people, some through here, and then maybe 6 months later, you sort of lose touch. But sort of how do you reconnect with people? That's one question back, because you don't want to just randomly like, hey, what's up? I think people do have like, what is the verbiage? What are some words I should be saying? And second part is, what are some topics that you would suggest that can sort of start a meaningful conversation or relationship? Do you talk about the weather? Do you talk about COVID? Do you talk about current events? What would be good topics to talk about?
Appreciate you asking me that question to keep me awake, right? Towards the end. I think just to kind of reach out and hear a human voice on the other end, I think helps, right? At the end of the day, that you actually took time to reach out, right? So whatever that may be, if you start with how are you doing, how are you feeling, how's everything, how's the family, and then you listen, right? You listen and you kind of let that conversation flow. So at the end of the day, if someone's actually reaching out to you, they're showing interest, and you take that opportunity. It doesn't have to be so well thought out to that degree. Don't make it canned, but just be a real person. There's a lot of folks on this panel alluded to. We're building that relationship. So again, there's that initial contact. If you haven't, spoken with them in 6 months, this is probably one of the better times to reach out to check in and say, how are you doing, right? And kind of re-engage that conversation to let them know that you're here and we're doing okay. I wanted to check in to see how you're doing. I think it doesn't get any more real than that. So from that conversation, I think that lead to, how are things going? They're going to naturally, if you find interest in them, they're going to ask you that question as well, right? And you can let them know, I'm in the search process. I'm looking to do this. I'm engaging in different things, but I really wanted to reach out to see how you're doing as well. Again, reaching out and reconnecting, there's different ways to do it. But I think a lot of folks, as much as I love these Zooms, I'm on probably 12 Zooms a day, right? And I'm sure a lot of folks feel that way as well. When I get a phone call, I'm okay to walk around a little bit, So if you have the phone number, reach out. If you can text them, that's perfectly fine. But I think just connecting with them and hearing the voice has been helpful, right? As I mentioned earlier. So thanks.
Okay. How about anyone else have any topics that you found to be a really good conversation starter? Because I feel like that's a lot of people have that hard. Like, I know we talk about the weather and we talk about current events, but sometimes there's other topics that seems to be really good.
I think if there's an article that comes out that you've, it's definitely if there's an article that comes out in the Times or the Journal, Financial Times, The Economist, I think that's I think that's a really good something that you can share with the individual. But I think also if you come about something that is not in one of those publications, something that's just off the beat, off the track, where it's a smaller publication or something that you can just kind of send and share with the person and say, hey, I read this article or thought about something that perhaps you and I can discuss, or there's something here about this article I'd like to get your input on. I think it's it's kind of like an icebreaker. You're sharing something to that person, especially if it's in that industry or in that specialized job, that you can kind of say, hey, I saw this and I thought about this. What do you think? And it kind of like an icebreaker, sharing information with someone, especially if it comes from not a traditional source.
Okay. And this to follow up with that question, I'm sure this is probably a good question too, is what topics should not be discussed? I guess, we talk about what should be, but what are things like absolutely don't talk about that?
I think politics is something that people should stay away from if you don't know the person. It's probably not going to help you in terms of making contacts, and there's different opinions. So I think that's something that, there's so many things to talk about now. There's so many people get connected on just COVID itself. What are you doing? Are you okay? How much do you walk every day? People go crazy about discovering their parks, and they're holding their phones. I've gotten calls from people while they're walking outside, and I started to do that. And just that human contact, as long as it's not something that is too political.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to comment? Okay. Mahir, maybe you can, since you answered it already, but I'll just repeat the question is it appropriate to reach out to a mentor for a job referral? I know you answered it already, but maybe if you can answer it verbally.
Yeah, absolutely. So at least in my opinion, a mentor should be actively referring you for jobs, because if they're not referring you for jobs, if they don't think you're good enough, why are they mentoring you in the first place, right? So I have mentored many students in Baruch in the past, and I still mentor new analysts joining my bank, and I actively try to push them up, make them look good. And when the time comes, if there's a specific position they're interested in, or I think they're a good match, I actively refer them to the job, because mentorship goes both ways. I'm mentoring them, but I also want them to land the good jobs. So you should never be ashamed to ask your mentor for referral, because that's part of the reason they're there for you. So don't be afraid, just ask.
Sure. One question I have for the past, I know we're always talking about rainbows and positive things, but is there any sort of, not horror stories, but I guess stories that are networking that didn't quite work out? Is there anyone, because I think that we can also learn from that, as Patti said, we can always learn from things that didn't quite work out the way we planned. And I think the attendees would love to hear that too. Things that's just networking that didn't quite work out like you would have expected, maybe. It could be earlier on in your career or something like that. You learned from that.
Pyramid schemes, Marion, very, very, very prevalent. And I think everyone who uses LinkedIn gets these unsolicited offers for pyramid schemes. Mm-hmm. And it has happened to me. Someone who's networking with me feels great. They're doing so great networking with me, and we feel a really good connect. And then, bam, oh, do you want to invest in my company? Or how do you feel you want to do this in your free time? And that just kind of kills it for me, because that kind of takes the whole relationship to a transactional level, and that's my horror story. And it's happened so many times. It's just scary.
Yeah.
Marion, I don't necessarily have a horror story, but I think most, horror stories with networking are opportunities lost. So, I referred to before, the idea of, following up, thoroughly with, anybody you've had an informational interview. 9 out of 10 of us don't do that. So, most horror stories are simply opportunities lost. Nonetheless, I think in networking, as long as you're professional, respectful, show genuine interest in the other person. Don't treat the relationship transactionally. You know, just use common sense. There's almost no harm that you can do. Case in point, and you know, almost anything is recoverable. And I think you'd also be surprised by how long people will remember you. So case in point, I just started at Google. The person who served as my reference for the job was someone I worked with about 15 years ago. I had not nurtured the relationship. I hadn't spoken with him since we worked together at Thomson Financial 15 years ago. Out of the blue, I pinged him on LinkedIn and said, hey, David, by the way, I'm applying for a job at Google. I would love to learn more about your experience at Google and about the company, right? So it wasn't transactional. Hey, I'm applying for this job. Can you do X, Y, and Z for me? No, you know, I want to reconnect with you. By all means, he responded right away. We chatted. He not only served as my reference, but right now he's serving as a mentor for me. He's kind of, you know, guiding me through the onboarding process at Google. He lives in Boulder, by the way. We're driving out to Boulder in a couple of weeks, and I may be staying at his house. This is somebody I haven't spoken to in 15 years. I really had not much of a relationship with. But it's all to say that once you establish a good relationship, and it doesn't have to be much, people remember you if you treat them with respect and if you, you know, start off on a really good foundation.
Great, thank you. I don't know what happened. So someone says they're applying for a specific field. However, it's been difficult since they lack the experience that people are looking for. Any suggestions for making a switch? You know, that was the question that's known specifically, but maybe whoever wants, Chintan, if you want to address that question.
It's very subjective, right? Like we need to have more context on this, but if at all people are looking to change the field, I always go back to the skills and what is required for the new skills, right? And what their interest is. And starting from learning the skills required for the new field they wanted to get into is a fundamental 101 I would recommend to start with. Anybody can do anything in this in the large different variety of field, right? But start with the fundamentals in terms of what are the skills required for the new field and start learning those, and meet with people who are in the field to understand how they are successful, or how they have learned, or what is their experience been in that field, so that you can know what you are going to get into. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Another question is, when you outreach to someone at LinkedIn, what is, like, you know, and they don't get back to you, like, what is the etiquette? How often after should you be like, hey, you haven't responded to me? Should you do it, you know, once after, or two after, or three after, and how long apart?
You know, sometimes what I do is I'm very interested in someone professionally, and in the social media feeds that come in on LinkedIn, I follow people. I don't always invite them in. And then I respond to something that they post that, you know, is of interest. And all of a sudden they're responding back to me. So you can always use that LinkedIn feed and also show what you can do by providing some information about whatever the topic is, and all of a sudden they recognize you more.
Yeah. Anyone else? I think, well, sorry, go ahead, Paden.
Yeah, so for that, I feel like if someone doesn't respond, it depends if you had a relationship prior, because for LinkedIn, you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. That's why I recommend messaging many people per week. Don't rely on one person to do everything for you. And also, someone asked this question previously, but I would say if you know that you're looking to either career change or looking to get into a different role or a different company, start trying to network with people. I would say almost like, I'll say at least 2 months before you initially plan to make that switch, because if you wait between, I'll say, oh, like I want to get a job next month, it may be too late, because again, you want the relationship to be natural. You don't want it to feel forced. So just taking either, like, I want to say a year to 3 months, I would say that's the ideal time to build up that relationship. So when you do apply for that job, it doesn't seem as forward, and it'll be more natural. They'll be more willing to refer you.
Great, thank you. This will be our last question. I'm just trying to put it into words. If I want, you know, I'm interested in one field, but I'm willing to do anything, no matter what jobs. When I'm outreaching to people for networking, should it be for a specific job, or should I already know what I want to do? But for example, Toby, I want to work at Google, but I don't really know what I want to do, but I just want to work at Google. Should I even have a plan to talk to you, or should I just say, hey, I would love to work here, wherever you think you could get me a job in?
I mean, I think that sort of conversation goes back to some of the points that we made earlier about the difference between posing the question, do you have a job, and looking to have an informational interview. I just put in the chat one of the books that I used to use as a Bible in my job searches, and I think is a phenomenal book on networking in general, called Through the Brick Wall by Kate Wendelton. Just an excellent resource, and I've been using it for the past 20 plus years. So while that may be your goal, just to get any job at Google, chances are that some jobs more than others would be suitable for you, and in the sense of good matches for your skill sets and your background, and then also ones that you would like. Guarantee you there are jobs at Google that you would not be suitable for and that you would not like, right? I mean, it's just such a big company. So, you know, if somebody approaches me and said, I'm just looking for a job at Google or company X or company Y, I'd probably, you know, think you need to do a little bit more homework work before I'm willing to invest time in helping you out, to be perfectly frank. You know, do your homework, like figure out who am I? Like, what's my background? What are my skill sets? What are my interests? Am I the sort of person that likes to work behind a desk and really do, you know, research kind of just by myself? Am I the type of person that likes to be out in front of people and talking and interacting? Do I look like to work on technical matters or more theoretical matters, right? And so at least, and then be able to talk about, this is the background that I bring and the accomplishments that I have, and I'd like to learn from you. That's the most constructive conversation to have in an initial informational interview.
Thank you. I want to take this, I don't want to take up any more time, so I want to sort of wrap it up here. We have a few more questions, but just for time's sake, I just want to move on. I want to thank the panelists so much for taking the time to speak to me and the panel, Patti, and all the attendees. I think what we learned today is that networking really is a tool that is really crucial in your job search, no matter what transition you're going to. Because I think, you know, all of us, whether it's COVID, whether it's something else, there's always going to be some form of transition in our career. And so it's so important to have people around us that can sort of help us with information, help us with our job transition, whatever that might be. But that's where networking comes in, is kind of creating that little circle. Because as, you know, Gehan said, he's not a Rockefeller, but, you know, we use our network to sort of help us move on so that that transition is as smooth as possible. So I want to thank Patti for moderating. If I can ask everyone to fill out the Qualtrics afterwards, right here is a link. When we finish, everyone who's RSVPs will send a recording as soon as the Zoom has been processed. It usually takes about like a few hours, so we'll probably send it tomorrow, next week. You know, if you want to outreach to any of the panelists, try not to stalk them on LinkedIn. If you can outreach to me, I'm happy to connect you. I just kind of want to field any questions, but you know, I'm happy to answer any questions about the panelists. I'll re-upload the documents. I've uploaded a few times about the panelist bio, as well as the announcement that I made earlier. So if anyone missed that, you have that in there. So, but I want to thank Greg for helping us organize this. Our relationship with alumni relations has been fantastic, and I think they help us so much in connecting with alumni, and in helping connect alumni with our students. I think that's such an important sort of relationship. So
thank you, Marion. And also, we'll share the panelists' info as well as a recording in our follow-up email tomorrow. So you guys will be able to get some additional information from there. And I want to just echo what Marion said. Thank you guys so much for being here, the panelists, as well as all the attendees. really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys at some future events coming down the pike. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Patti, you want to take us home?
No, actually, this has really been great. There was so much information that was shared, and it was really heartfelt, and it was pragmatic, and it was the do's and it was the don'ts, and I just found the whole session very motivating. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you. All right. Thank you again, panelists, everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know these are some crazy times that we're living in, but we appreciate you taking time to help our students, our alumni. We can all use a little help, and I think it's really appreciated you took your time to help us out today. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Stay safe. Be healthy. Let's all be kind to each other. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.